We are thrilled tonight to have Tuere Sala joining us. I had the good fortune of being in a retreat with her about a year and a half ago before COVID at Heartwood. And Venerable Panawati said she's never seen a group of participants get still as quickly as we got stilled. And she didn't hold a whip either. So Panawati was very, very impressed, as were us participants. So we're glad to have her here tonight. Tuere is a guiding teacher at the Seattle Insight Meditation Society and also at the Spirit Rock Retreat Center. She is a retired prosecuting attorney who has practiced Vipassana meditation for over 30 years. She believes that urban meditation is the foundation for today's practitioners' path to liberation. She is inspired by bringing the Dharma to non-traditional places and is a strong advocate for practitioners living with high stress, past trauma, and difficulties sitting still. Tuere has been teaching since 2010 and has a long history of assisting others in establishing and maintaining a daily practice. And Tuere, we welcome you, and I'm so glad you're here, and may you all have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's really quite special to be able to be all over the world and never really leave my apartment. It's kind of, it's a little striking to me, given how much I traveled before COVID, but it's very nice. I'm so glad to be here. I know Ward from a long time, and who would have thought that I'd be here with you? It's kind of special because we, you don't know me, many of you don't know me at all, and yet there's a trust that happens when we come to hear the Dhamma, and I don't know you, but there's a trust to want to get together and talk. And so somehow over the course of this evening, I hope that trust gets, we establish a link between it. So from my understanding, we'll sit for a half hour here or so, and then I'll do a little talking, and then we'll have some question and answers, see how, what kind of questions we have. I think I'd like to talk about the Brahmavirus, but I think the way I talk about the Brahmavirus might be a little different than the way you normally hear them. I talk about them as capacity, and because that is really the capacity, that's where I got the capacity to practice. And so I'd like to start, since we're going to talk about Brahmavihara as capacity, I'd like to start with a poem. And I like to read poems before meditation. I do all the time when I'm going to meditate. I like to read a poem ahead of time because I found that I have never had a meditation where I didn't do a lot of thinking. But when I started reading poetry, at least I gave the mind something onward leaning to think about. And so if I'm going to do thinking, I might as well think on something that Mary Oliver said, since she's so beautiful. Well, she was so beautiful, but she still is. So this is a poem Mary Oliver wrote called Can You Imagine? And you may have heard it before, but some of you may not have. This is what she says. Can you imagine, for example, what the trees do? Not only in lightning storms or the watery dark of a summer night, or under the white nets of winter, but now, and now, and now, whenever we're not looking. Surely you can't imagine they don't dance from the roots up, wishing to travel a little, not cramped so much as wanting a better view or more sun, or just as avidly more shade. Surely you can't imagine. They just stand there, loving every minute of it. The birds or the emptiness, the dark rings of the years slowly and without a sound thickening, and nothing different unless the wind, and then only in its own mood, comes to visit. Surely you can't imagine patience and happiness like that. That's what we could think about. What do trees do when we're not looking? What do trees do? Do they just stand there? Could we just sit here without doing anything, without having to go down the list of things to get done? Could we actually just sit here and be appreciative of that? Is that possible? We'll give it a try and see if it's possible to actually enjoy just sitting, nothing to do, no special kind of sitting, just sitting. And I think a good way to start is to just notice the sounds around you. You could notice the sound of me talking, or you can notice the sounds outside of where you're living. It doesn't matter when I do this, but as soon as I get quiet, I hear the airplanes up in the clouds. I'm just sitting here listening to sound, allowing it to be. You may not hear anything, like the silence itself, but you might notice that that silence ebbs and flows just like the movement of auditory sounds. Sometimes the silence is thick, and sometimes it's thin and subtle. You can notice and get interested in how the sound breaks the silence, or does the silence muffle the sound? I mean, does sound arise out of silence? Or does silence kind of drop into constant sound? You could also notice the body just sitting here. You could notice the heaviness of the body, the weight of skin and flesh and bones. You could let that weight, that heaviness, you could let it relax into the earth, the ground, the chair that you're sitting in. You could let the weight of your arms from the underside of your arms just drop into the chair, drop into your lap. Let the weight from underside your legs just hold the body, the legs up. You don't actually have to hold yourself up at all. You can just relax into the weight of just sitting here. Maybe noticing the hardness of the bones in the feet, and the sit bones, hands. Even through all that soft flesh and skin, you can still feel the hardness of bone. You can connect to the stillness here of just sitting. Get a sense that there's the movement of sound, and then there's the stillness of the body. There's movement and there's stillness. And if you're willing to let go of all the intellect and thinking and talking that can go on in the head, in the mind, you could just pay attention to what is the felt sense of stillness and the felt sense of movement. You might feel that with the breath. Body is still, legs are not moving, feet are not moving, there's nothing moving. And yet the breathing is a constant movement. So just for a little while, see if you could get interested in noticing sound and the movement of sound, or the felt sense of the body just sitting here, a stillness, or the joining of the two, of stillness and movement, by noticing the breath. And I'll ring the bell in just a few minutes. It's not a lot of time. So just consider what's more important. Allowing yourself a breather where you just do nothing, and just relax, or thinking on that thing you've been thinking about all day anyway, and you're pretty much going to think about it again as soon as this is over. Can you imagine what trees do? Not only in the lightning storms or the watery dark of a summer night or under the white nets of winter, but now, now, and now, whenever we're not looking. Surely you can't imagine they don't dance from the root up, wishing to travel a little. Not cramped so much as wanting a better view or more sun, or just as avidly more shade. Surely you can't imagine they just stand there, loving every minute of it. The birds or the emptiness, the dark rings of the years slowly and without a sound thickening, and nothing different unless the wind, and then only in its own mood, comes to visit. Surely you can't imagine patience and happiness like that. I love this poem. I can't see trees without imagining patience and happiness. It's something about recognizing that. So I'd like us to take 5 minutes to go look out a window and notice a tree. Just stand there and look at it. See if you can notice that patience and happiness. And if you're not around any trees, because I live in the inner city, so trees are far and few to come by, then just take a moment to type in tree in Google and look at a tree. Doesn't matter. Just want to take a moment to see if we can grasp what this happiness is. And then I'll ring the bell and call us back in 5 minutes. I thought tonight I would talk about the Brahmaviharas, mostly because when you come to hear a Dhamma talk from a teacher you don't even know, or if I go to a place to teach in a place that I don't know, there's an awkwardness about that, and yet there's a level of trust and faith that we both bring to this moment that can be everlasting, depending on how we get touched in that moment. And I think the Brahmaviharas are a great way for us to connect. The Brahmaviharas being the four, I guess you could call them the heavenly messengers or the heavenly abodes, or I guess they're not really called the heavenly messengers. That's something else, but really the heavenly abodes, the place where gods and higher beings reside. They're the heart qualities. So where the heart resides. And I'd like to talk about metta and the Brahmaviharas as capacity, what it can do for our practice. And I thought that along the way of having this conversation about metta, I could tell you a little bit about me, and you could get to know how I came to be so intertwined with the Dhamma. Because I am so intertwined with the Dhamma. And I think probably the best place to start is a story when I first came into connection with the Dhamma, how I came to the Dhamma in the first place. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I went to law school. I grew up pretty poor in a pretty rugged family, pretty difficult. And so going to school, my parents were very strict about education. So getting a law degree was like, oh, this is my ticket out. And so I had two boys, I was a single parent, and pretty much lived the bulk of my 20s and early 30s on welfare. And so when I got out of law school, everything pointed towards, this is my end. This is the thing. We finally made it, and it's all downhill from here. And then I took the bar and I failed it. And I think the first time I failed the bar, and I did say the first time I failed the bar, I figured it was the bar exam, which is racist and didn't have anything to do with me because I'm like super duper smart. Everyone says so. So it's got to be the bar exam itself. So I did a whole bunch of little things to try to help me get through the bar. And then I failed it a second time. And I think up until that moment of that second time I failed the bar, I always blamed any difficulties I had in life out there. It's that fault. It's not me. Something's wrong out there. And if I fix out there, then I can have everything back to the way it's supposed to be. And when I failed the bar that second time, I believed there was something wrong with me. And it was this huge, this humongous crisis of faith. Just, it was the unraveling of everything that I believed in. Because if it wasn't all downhill, then what was all the misery for that I had gone through for most of my life, and the misery the boys had? And I remember going to the library and finding a book written by Trungpa Rinpoche called Loving Kindness or Mind Training, Cultivating Loving Kindness. It was about the Tibetan practice of the Lojong practice. It's 59 slogans. So every day I would read a slogan. When I was in the bookstore, I opened that book and I didn't understand any of it. And the first page I opened to, the slogan was, abandon all hope of fruition. And I thought, what kind of book is this? I was born and raised Christian. What kind of book is this? Abandon all hope. How in the world is that going to cultivate any kind of loving kindness? And so I pretty much bought that book because I thought that was the strangest concept ever. And I wanted to read it to understand, how could you cultivate loving kindness if you didn't have any hope? What kind of world would that look like? And so every day I would read a slogan, and they were just short little statements. And then I would read Trungpa's commentary about that slogan. And the next day, read a slogan, Trungpa's commentary, 59 days. And then I would start over again, another 59 days, and start over again. And over the course of 10 years, I looked at that. I did that every day. And I would sit quietly for, half hour, 45 minutes, let it seep in so I could get the feel of it. So that was my practice. I was a strong meditator. And as far as I was concerned, I was heading into enlightenment any minute now. Just slogan, let it germinate. That's it. And nothing really changed in my life, though, even though I felt like I was going places. And I remember one day watching TV with my two boys. So the oldest would have been in high school and the youngest was in middle school. This commercial came on where they had these two little weeds, like a Laurel and Hardy kind of thing, where it's a tall, skinny weed and a short, fat weed. And they had suitcases and they were moving quick on the road. And one would say, do you think we can make it out? Do you think we can make it out? And the other one's like, I don't know. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. We can do it. And then this giant boot came in front of them and sprayed them dead with Roundup. Oh my God, I lost it. I was so hysterical and crying so hard. My sons were sitting there trying to figure out what in the world has happened to Mama. I lost it. I couldn't imagine. It was this level of harm that I couldn't imagine had happened. Is probably the first time that I realized something dramatic was changing with me. Because I realized that in that moment, I was so close to those weeds and they were cartoon characters. And yet I had this felt sense of care for their well-being and their capacity to live. And I tried to explain that to the boys through all the crying, and they just kept laughing because they could not grasp what was happening. And I tried to explain to them that I just think I'm feeling kinder. I think I'm feeling nicer. And they were just like, you might want to put that book down, you guys. You might want to put that aside. So I thought, okay, I need to cultivate loving kindness. I need to do more with this practice because it was somehow opening me up. And I started looking for and listening into all kinds of stuff around metta. But I couldn't really feel it. I could listen to a metta talk. I could go to a metta, do a metta sit and the guided meditations, but I never had that felt sense of the heart opening. I couldn't understand why I couldn't connect with the Brahmaviharas and feel it like I did for those two plants. How come I can't open the heart? I did eventually pass the bar, and I was a prosecutor I'm retired now, but I was for a good 25, maybe almost 30 years. And it's a rough kind of world to be in. It doesn't lend itself for kindness, even though I think I ultimately became one of the kindest prosecutors I ever knew, but I did not work in a field where kindness was something that was all around me. And the places I lived was always the inner city. And there's not a lot of kindness that I would say in the inner city. So this constantly trying to open my heart to kindness against a backdrop of a world that didn't seem very kind. And I am an avid cop show. I love cop shows. Law and Order, Hill Street Blues, it didn't matter. If it was a cop show, I wanted to watch it. I wanted to try to solve the murder before they did. And again, it doesn't lend itself to very much kindness. So this, I think I ultimately began to think of metta and kindness, the Brahmaviharas, as this kind of syrupy, soft kind of I love you way of being, but it wasn't really real. Probably the best example would be my mother when we were kids, back when we didn't just carry our phones around with us. We used to be kids and we would have a phone, and the phone would ring and everybody would stop. So in my house, my mother could be scolding after us and then the phone would ring and then she would say, hello, just all sweet, nice and kind. That's what I thought kindness was. I thought it was that kind of way we be in the world. But I didn't imagine it could be me, that the very essence of who I would be kind, or the very essence of what made me a Dhamma practitioner would be compassion or joy, or that I would walk around and experience this on a regular basis. I thought it was something that I kind of did. But if you notice trees, they just are. They just are trees. We just look at them and they're just trees. There's these trees here in my yard, and I watch them change leaves and all that over the years, and they're just trees. And yet, when we get into the presence of big, huge trees, they can take our breath away. We can stare at them for hours. There's something very palpable about trees and what trees can offer us. And so that's what I think the Brahmaviharas are. And the way I came to understand them was at a retreat. It was a very, very, very difficult retreat. I was upset pretty much through the whole thing. And one day I was sitting there having a meal. It was Christina Feldman and Rodney Smith. And we were sitting there. I was sitting there having this meal and listening to sound, just hearing. I don't know. I just stopped doing and I was just listening. And it was about 100 people on this retreat. I didn't know anybody. And all of a sudden, these people began to look like family members, like aunties and uncles and grandmas and daughters, nephews, nieces, children. All these people started looking like we were at a big family reunion. And I remember the felt sense of care that I had for the people I was looking at. It wasn't like I was trying to make myself care about them. I just was feeling a sense of care for them. It wasn't like I was imagining they were my family. I felt like I was in a dining hall full of family members. I watched the way people would, not even speaking to each other, get out of the way or offer somebody, turn the butter just so someone else could get some, or how there was this quiet kind of hum over the whole room and we were all together, kind of talking in a language that was shared, and yet I didn't say anything. I didn't even know these people. I went to the hall a little bit after that, and in the hall, all the negativity came back up. But somewhere in me, I thought to myself, oh, I'm sitting with family. We're all kind of in this together. I'm not really by myself. And somehow that felt sense of being with family helped me hold this difficulty. There was a level of not me trying to meditate by myself, but a we-ness trying to understand the nature of dukkha. Not me and my problem, but a sense of humanness and our problem. This is a human problem, a human difficulty. Somehow the whole personalness of the whole difficulty that I was facing on that retreat began to shift, and I began to feel this great appreciation for having spent the money and the time to be on that retreat and be in the presence of so many other beings doing the same thing. And I could just be with it. Eventually, the retreat, as all retreats eventually do, turned into this great stillness. And I was happy. And I left. I thought it was all about me in some respects. And about 2 weeks after that retreat is when my understanding of the Brahmaviharas changed. It's about 2 weeks after that retreat, I was walking to work, and I had to be at work at 7:30. So the walk to downtown Seattle was very crowded. And so, you just keep it moving. If you're walking around a big city, you don't be stopping, you just keep it moving. And I was walking to work, keeping in my pace, mind drifting off into that retreat. And it hit me. It hit me so strong that I just stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. And I heard all this drama around me. But I was stunned that what happened in the dining hall was metta. This is the first time I realized that metta was an understanding that we had in relation to life. And metta was this general kindness that just we can be kind in any given moment, just by softening in any given moment. And that metta turned into compassion when I got back into the hall and I was sad. And it was difficult to try to meditate with a mind that was very aggressive. And I could feel the joy of mudita when I was so appreciative, realizing that we're all in it together, and this steadiness to be with that difficulty and all the stillness that came afterwards. And I'm standing there in the middle of the sidewalk realizing, oh my God, it was metta all along. It was the Brahmavirus all along. That it was not so that from the time I stepped on the path, I would say it was when I saw that cartoon, that commercial about the two weeds, that I stepped on the path in that moment. Or I stepped on the path when I bought the book, but over the course of the book, that moment was the beginning of the softening of Tuere's heart. And it was softening and softening and softening and softening. And it was softening no matter what I was doing. The heart was still softening. It didn't have anything to do with me believing metta, liking metta, don't like metta. My heart was still softening and softening and softening. And in the moment at that retreat, I realized that I had it backwards. It wasn't just wisdom. Can I be with the breath? It was this wisdom that was held by compassion. So the two wings of the Dhamma, they say, is this wisdom that's held in this softer grace. And when we hold that wisdom in the softer grace, we have this ability to see and do and be with things that we don't normally have the capacity to see or do or be with. And that's what happened. So I kind of gathered myself together and I started cultivating this capacity. And I want to talk a little bit about ultimately what we do when we cultivate this capacity. Because metta itself, it's just universal kindness. But it's not kindness from my perspective, like how nice are you at the grocery store? It's not kindness that you do for someone. It's actually more of a receptiveness, allowing, a folding into, or a willingness to be softened in this moment. So when I thought of metta before, I thought it was related to how kind I was or how kind I could be. But when I think of metta now, it's more of the felt sense of softening into this moment. And that softening into this moment could be just softening into the knee pain that's always there. Just softening and allowing it to be there. And somehow that softening, that willing to be receptive, that willingness to I think be here is what metta is all about. It's what the kindness is all about. Meaning that I don't know that I even believe anymore that kindness is about doing anything. I think what I am more and more and more and more coming to believe in my own understanding of practice, that the more I'm willing to be with whatever the present moment offers without having to somehow have my way or fix it or make it different, the more I am willing to be in the present moment, the kinder I have become. There's no agenda, there's no identity I have to cultivate. I just don't mind being here with whatever's happening. This is what's important right now. And something about that ultimately turns into kindness. And when they say that kindness is compassion turned towards suffering, I believe that. I have the ability to be with difficulty if I'm willing to soften into the present moment. I have the capacity to be with some pretty serious difficulties that I've had of late with family members that died unexpectedly and all kinds of things that have happened. I mean, just the holding of yogis who are suffering at great levels around this pandemic, that in and of itself, it takes a great deal of compassion. But what I found is it doesn't take a great deal of me feeling sorry for them. It doesn't even take a great deal of me carrying their pain. It takes a great deal of me being willing and receptive to be with them, even if they're feeling pain. So just this willingness to be in the present moment, a willingness to be here and now, in the presence of someone else's pain. I don't have to fix it. I don't try to fix it. I don't feel the urgency to somehow heal that pain. I just have the capacity to be with another's pain. When I was a prosecutor when I started practicing the Dhamma, and I spent a lot of time going into prisons, even as a prosecutor. And it takes something to go into a prison as a prosecutor, because you got a lot of angry people in prison, and they're usually angry at their prosecutor. And I've had some pretty difficult moments, to say the least. But I think what happens is that I don't have to convince the inmates that I'm not going to be a prosecutor anymore. I don't have to convince the inmates that I hate being a prosecutor, so I hate myself. It's just a job. I don't have to demean my duties. All I have to do is to be willing to hear their suffering. That's it. I don't have to apologize for how they ended up in prison and the system is all unfair and there's all kinds of intellectual stuff that goes on. I don't have to do any of that. I have to be willing to sit there with them and hear their pain. That's it. It doesn't require any special skill. It doesn't come from any great capacity that I might have as an individual, it comes from one thing: softening into the present moment where there's difficulty. Softening, being receptive, being willing to be in the present moment, even if there's difficulty. I've also learned, I have this thing that I started telling people because it's something I realized, is that there is joy all over the place. This world is reeking of joy. It's everywhere. It's infested. And so the way to think about this is, I have two joys in my lifetime. I mean, each year, I'm given two opportunities of great joy. You get two. And if you're like me, you've probably used your two up already, because I've definitely used up my two probably in January. So how do I enjoy the rest of my life if all I got was two and they're gone? And I begin to realize that if I share the joy of another, not happy that you got a new job and I hate my job, so I'm going to try to pretend I'm happy you got a job, but a felt sense of looking at someone who is happy, you will start smiling too. If I'm happy and I am just beaming with it, you will start smiling also. You will start beaming with it. Not because you have to do anything special, but because you are present in the moment of my beaming, you will feel that beaming too. We are human. If I cry, you will feel that crying. If I'm beaming, you will feel that beaming. I realized that as long as I was willing to be in the present moment with kindness, that in and of itself created this natural capacity for compassion and for joy. So I make sure that at least once a day somewhere, I'm gonna think about somebody who is happy. Somebody, for all the, when COVID was getting really bad and the news was just this onslaught of new cases, dying people, it was just a torrent of how bad things were. I would think about all the people who just had a baby. And even though they were scared for the baby, they were so happy because babies are so cute. And they're so overwhelmed with the just the joy of this little baby. Or people who were asking their partner to marry them, regardless of what's going on in the world. They were taking a chance and hoping that the partner said yes. And in my imagination, partners always said yes. So it was always, I could have told you it was going to be okay. But I would think on people who got a job in the middle of COVID, people who found a new house. I mean, there were so many things that were happening that were bringing people joy. I would think on these things always, so that I could remember that the only thing that was happening in the world was not the death and fear of COVID. And it added this balance to the reality and this way of being equanimous in the midst of this ever-changing, constantly rearranging world that we were living in. And it was happening so quick. I mean, it still happens so quick right now. There's this constant fight. You never know how it's going to be. First, I got my vaccine and I was like, oh, I feel free, comfortable, can do whatever. I go for a walk if I can every day. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to take my mask off. It's scary, but I'm going to take the mask off and I'm going to walk around outside with no mask because I'm feeling free. Now, not so much. Getting back into that felt sense of maybe I better keep that mask on, vaccination or not, you never know. Just the whole thing is always ever changing. But what I have come to understand about the Brahmaviharas as a practice is that instead of me trying to be with metta, I try to be present in this moment, whatever's going on. I don't care. I'm going to try to soften into the moment. Hold on, let me think if there's something else I want to share, and then we can have some question and answers or comments in general. Oh, so let me talk a little bit about, let's say, the practice of the Brahmaviharas. Because I did cultivate the Brahmaviharas. I did cultivate by practicing with them. And I think the best way I could say that we're cultivating the Brahmaviharas is you're cultivating, or you are first having this willingness to be present. But then there's something else about the Brahmavihara practice, which is that practice where we say the phrases. And when I first started saying these phrases, I thought I was supposed to say the phrases and send this energy out to people. So I would say, may you be happy, and I'm sending, may you be happy out. And I'm not saying there's not a sending that doesn't happen with the Brahmaviharas, but what I started learning was what was an even more, I guess you could say, capacity building practice was this saying of the phrases like a mantra to generate this internal felt sense of whatever, of care, of softening, of kindness here, right now, just here. And I would say the phrases until I could feel a connection with the words and the sentiment itself. So the saying of the phrases was not something I gave to someone else. It was a saying of the phrases until I could understand what it is I was saying. So it's not just may you be happy. It's may you be happy, may you be happy, may you be happy, may you be happy, until I feel may you be happy. And I mean it. I'm not just saying a sentence. I mean, may you be happy. So that cultivation, the repetitiveness of saying the phrases is to bring me to a level of concentration. So I'm letting go of the concept of may you be happy, and I'm feeling this notion that I and you want to be happy. I'm going to read a poem here. This is probably before I really started getting into the Brahmaviharas. So before that retreat I went to, and I had that awakening into the truth of what I thought the Brahmaviharas were, I always thought of trees and, outdoors, like going out into nature. like that's outdoorsy kind of stuff. I never thought of me being a part of nature, but more as me going into nature so I could go to the park where it's all green and trees and I'll be part of nature. But something happened after that experience with the Brahmaviharas. And when it hit me was again a moment, it's always been for me a moment of compassion. But shortly after that understanding, that wisdom that hit me on the sidewalk, some mover was moving a truck from the front, a big truck from in front of our building, and they ripped one of the limbs off of one of the trees in front. And we were all in a tizzy. What should we do? How can we fix this tree? And the arborist, I think they're called, he came and said, the tree will be fine. You just let the tree just let the tree heal itself. And so every day I would go out and I would see this wounded tree and I would send metta to that tree. It was a completely easy thing to do. I would just touch the tree and tell the tree, I hope you're okay. I hope you can heal yourself. Just every day, because it was right out in front of the door. So as soon as I walked out, I would see this tree and I would touch it. And, hope you're okay. Hope you're okay. I begin to realize that the metta is for in here, in me, not whether or not I can be nice to people out there, but can I be soft and receptive in here? And in that, I would send metta to anything. And mostly, I began to cultivate it by sending metta to ants, to trees, to nature, what I would call nature. It took a while to build up to send it to humans, but it was easy to send it to nature. And so I used it all the time, sending it, bushes, flowers, it didn't matter. I sent it all the time. And over time, this capacity to connect with here, then I could send it to anyone. I could send metta to George Bush. He was my difficult person. He was in the midst of my big opening around the Brahmaviharas. We were in the Iraq War, and I thought he was despicable, just one of the worst. And so he was my difficult person. And I would send him metta every day, to find a way to be able to care about someone's humanness, regardless of how angry I was about their actions. It is as if sometimes I think as practitioners, we forget that we're as bad as everybody else. So all the people we're all hating and wishing this person is the worst. We rarely look in the mirror and see how much harm we actually cause. So he was my reminder that, yeah, me too. I know what it's like to get caught up in the prosecutors. We would be in the lunchroom. We're all gossiping and talking about people and making fun of judges or making fun of defense attorneys. And we're doing all this because we think we're better and we got the right way. And you could feel our harm. If somebody hurt us and came into that room, they would be harmed by what we say. But yet in the room, it felt like we're good. But we're all caught up in that energy. And George Bush is who taught me how to begin to see through that energy enough to say, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah, no, I can't keep getting mad at George Bush and not noticing what I'm doing too. Yeah, in fact, I didn't want to leave the lunchroom because that's the only fun we had. So I had to stay in there, but I didn't want to get caught up in the gossiping. So I came up with a way to do it is I just wouldn't talk. I would just stop talking and I would just eat my lunch so that nobody would know that I'm not going to participate in that gossip. But people begin to figure that out and they'd say, uh-oh, Tuere, stop talking. We must be gossiping. Uh-oh, we must be doing some kind of anti-Buddhist thing here. So settle down, everybody. So it ultimately helped us center our conversations and fun, not at the, not against the harm of someone else, something that someone else did. We could have our fun without having to put someone else down. And so that ultimately helped all of us. But it was because I was practicing with the willingness to be right here. So this is a poem by Laura Foley called The Quiet Listeners. She says, go into the woods and tell your story to the trees. They are wise, standing in the folds of silence among white crystals of rock and dying limbs. They have time for the swaying of leaves, the floating down of dust. They have time for gathering and holding the earth about their feet. Do this. It is something I have learned, how they will bend down to you softly. They will bend down to you and listen. Isn't that beautiful? That's what trees do. If you've never walked up to a tree and whispered something to it, you gotta try that. If you don't, there's a way in which the Dhamma is pointing us towards the experience of love and care and kindness and compassion and joy, not in the usual way that we access it. So you have to go to a tree and you have to whisper some suffering you have. I left my father. I had such an antagonistic relationship with my father. I left him at a retreat center. I went to a group of trees and I said, that's it. I cannot carry this man any longer. Do you guys think you can carry him? I believe that you can. You're pretty powerful. Can you carry him for me? And I waited. And I got the sense that everybody was like, yeah, we can carry him. You can leave him here. So I whispered and told them all these little things that my father had done. And I asked them to carry him. I have never carried my father's guilt or pressure or harm since then. I left it there. And so there's a way in which nature can help us access the level of love and compassion that the Brahmaviharas offer so that we can then share it with humans. But we may have to start on the level of nature first. I think that's probably enough. I could go on and on and on, but I think we probably should take a moment to be quiet. And then I'll see if you guys have any comments. So let's just take a moment to think about, how does all this land for you? What comes to you? What do you think about all this? Do you struggle with the Brahmaviharas? And if you do you think it's possible that you could actually have a different relationship with them? What if you really could be soft and kind naturally? Just a part of who you are. People see you and say, oh, so nice, so kind. When did that happen? All righty. Thank you so much for your kind attention. So let's see if anybody has anything they'd like to share. Oh, okay, go ahead. Is it time?
It's Thea. Would you like
Thea. That's right, Thea. Go ahead.
Tuere, thank you so much. Hi. That was such a generous talk. I just also have struggled with Brahmaviharas in a way that I get them and then I don't get them, and I get them and I don't get them. And for you to just blow this wide open in this way, it really, I can feel it in my body. And it makes so much sense the way that you spoke about it tonight. So the word that I kept hearing as I was making notes tonight was willingness, just willingness. And I really just can't thank you enough for this topic and the way you delivered it. It's just quite beautiful. So
No, you're welcome.
yeah. So
I learned that willingness from nature. So you spend the time in nature, you begin to understand what willingness looks like. We don't necessarily learn it from humans. We have to go to nature and see that first.
And to end, and then I'll let someone else have time to end. I think about equanimity when I think about the trees too.
Yes.
The rootedness and, the stillness and the just being with what is. And so just beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I saw another hand, but maybe it's put back down. Let's see. Oh, go ahead, Judy. Oh, you're still on mute, though.
There we go. One of my favorite little cartoon things or something is Eeyore. And it reminded me so much of this when Pooh Bear and what's the other one? Piglet had missed Eeyore, and they went to see him, and he was so depressed. And he said he didn't want to talk to anybody because he didn't want to make them depressed. And they sat down beside him. And he's going, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, we're here." The ability to not have to solve somebody's problems, just be with them while they have their problems. I love that. The way you explained it was so beautiful.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we don't have to solve other people's problems. In fact, if you ask most people, they'll say, "I don't really want you to solve it. I just want someone that's willing to sit here with me for a moment. Just let me kind of hold it myself. Just sit here with me. That's all I need. I don't need you to fix it for me." Even homeless people, they don't need you to do a whole bunch of drama for them, but they do need you to be willing to be there with them. Just to notice them, and not walk by as if they don't even exist.
So Tuere, we have a couple of comments in the chat if you'd like to pull up the chat, or I can read them for you.
Let's see here. Yes, softening into everything. That's it's really the softening into. I thought that Brahmaviharas were somehow related to something else. And what I learned was the Brahmaviharas is related to our ability to be with the present moment. And we need to soften. Our lives is very hard, very hard. It is extremely difficult to be a human. And at the same time, when the Buddha was when he came into the world, he did not come into a world that was all rosy and nice and everything was great. He came into a world where people pretty much killed each other as much as we kill each other. People were pretty much fighting and arguing and harming each other just like we do. He came into the same world that we live in. And yet he spent all that time cultivating access to enlightenment. And that's what he taught. That's what he taught people. Because I have learned over the almost 30 years of practicing that the more I am willing to soften into the present moment, the less afraid I am about what shows up. Because it's pretty much the same stuff over and over and over. So when you've seen it, you begin to get used to and comfortable being with it. I have been in situations where I didn't have a job, and so I'm comfortable with not having a job. It's not that I don't want a job, but I'm not afraid just because I don't have a job. I've had times when I didn't have a job and then eventually found one. So the idea that we keep living in our fears about what could happen is really what's causing us so much grief. But if we soften into the moment, it's surprising how much capacity we have to be with life's challenges. How would you respond to someone that insulted you instead of exploding in rage and cursing? Well, I'll probably explode into rage and curse. That sometimes the exploding into rage and cursing is an automatic response. It's a habit. It's not me. So my cultivating kindness actually, the more you spend time being in the present moment, the more you can separate your distortions from reality. So when somebody insults you, oftentimes you're taking something personal that doesn't have to be personal. I've had people say racist things to me. And, I don't like the racism part of it. But I'm not racist because someone else says some racist thing to me. And they surely don't know me. If they say some crazy thing to me, they don't know me. So I just assume they must be talking to the person behind me because they couldn't possibly be talking to me. There's a way in which I stopped. I don't know how to say this. I don't live for the opinions of other people. I don't have to, because the more you cultivate this capacity to soften into the present moment, the more you're able to know who and what you are. You know it. So there's a way in which you become, you're thick. I guess your skin gets thicker and your capacity gets stronger, and you stop exploding, not because you have to bite your tongue and keep yourself from saying something, but because you're just no longer entangled in someone else's opinion. And so that's what I think the cultivation. I used to have a lot of problems with anger. I mean, I grew up in a traumatic family, so rage was my go-to response. And intimidating people to get my way was a normal thing that I would do. So what ultimately happened was that I learned to bear the little irritants. I went to my teacher and I'm like, I keep getting rageful. I need you to help me stop being rageful. And he said, well, don't worry about the rage. Worry about all the little irritations you're having. And I'm like, will that end the rage? And he goes, stop worrying about the rage. Just focus on the irritation. And I'm like, well, I don't get irritated. I go from 0 to 90. I'm at the rage before I have any chances. He goes, well, you start watching the irritations. You do that, and then come tell me if you don't have any. And sure enough, I cannot believe how irritated I was constantly. I didn't like anything. I didn't like that the sun was shining too much in my window and I can't see. Or I didn't like the way the lady closed the door when she went out. She pushed it too hard. I couldn't believe how irritated I was at every single thing. But mostly I would just suck that up, suck it up, suck it up, suck it up, ignore it. And then something would come along, some little thing would happen, and I would blow up into this rage. But really, he was right. It's not the rage that you have to worry about. It's the irritations that you're ignoring that you have to soften into. And there's a part of the path is right view, right intention. And right intention is 3 thoughts. Basically, to do no harm, to be as kind as you can, and to live a renunciate life, which I call not needing to get my way. So I set 3 vows in front of myself. I'm not gonna do any harm, be as kind as I can, and I'm gonna try to not always have to get my way. And somehow over the course of constantly coming back to those vows, I gradually began to deal with the irritations. I began to let the irritations just be there, stop trying to, worry about the irritation so much. And over time, I stopped. And when I knew something had changed, I heard my sister tell her granddaughter, who was like 16, yeah, Tuere, she's still mean. She's still angry, but she's not mean. And that's the difference. It's not the anger. Anger is just an emotion like all the rest of them, but we don't have to be mean with it. And that's what began to shave away, was the meanness, the vindictiveness, the me causing harm to other people. That I began to shave away. All right, so I'm going to read a poem. This is what we're doing. It's part of life, and we just get ourselves comfortable back into silence, and we will send some metta. It's a poem entitled Ancient Language by Hannah Stevenson. If you stand at the edge of the forest and stare into it, every tree at the edge will blow a little extra oxygen toward you. It has been proven. Leaves have admitted it. The pines I have known have been especially candid. One said that all breath in this world is roped together, that breathing is the most ancient language. So let's do a little breathing here. And since we've been spending so much time thinking about trees, if you can just close your eyes and kind of settle into this moment here, soften into just here. We're not going to be here long, so we're just going to settle here and get to notice your body breathing. Every inhale you take is the air given to you by trees and plants and flowers. And every exhale you send out is the air you're giving to them. So we're breathing in and we're breathing out together. But it's not just us. All the animals around you are breathing. All the birds, all the dogs, they're breathing in and breathing out. And all the ants and worms and bugs and whatnots are all under the earth. They're breathing. All the birds in the sky, they're breathing. All the humans all over this entire planet, no matter who we are, we're all breathing. So the greenery, the living beings, we're all breathing. speaking to each other in this ancient language. We're sharing inhale and exhale. So into this kind of rhythm of interconnectedness, we want to drop any beneficial energy that can arise from this practice. Anything that can support and help and hold the world to become better beings, to become safer beings, kinder beings, much more caring beings. And may whatever care is possible in the world, may it come from our practice. Just breathing in from the trees, breathing out to them, breathing in from the plants, breathing out to them. May all beings, without exception, know kindness. May they be peaceful and happy. May they feel safe from within and out. May they know joy and ease of well-being. All right, good peoples. Well, thank you kindly for your kind attention. I hope to see you again. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your care. Bye-bye.